As I watched the video, my world shattered. There she was, my wife, dancing provocatively with a man I once called a friend. The camera didn't miss a thing, their intimate movements, the laughter, and finally, the kiss that left no room for doubt. Betrayal burned through me, but before I could even confront her, fate intervened in a way I could never have predicted. Karma had its own plans, and trust me, it hit harder than I ever could. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching this from in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on what's next. The soft glow of Marty's laptop screen lit the dim room, a quiet sanctuary from the bustle of daily life. The sound of sneakers squeaking against hardwood echoed faintly through the speakers as the video showed Larry Big L Johnson sinking a clean buzzer-beater shot from beyond the arc. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Marty only smiled faintly, his eyes following Larry's graceful form on the court. "It was the perfect shot, as effortless as Larry had always made it seem," Tyler replied. To the right of the screen, a queue of video clips waited their turn. Marty didn't pay them much attention yet, content to bask in the nostalgia of watching Larry at his peak. Larry, with his long blonde hair tied neatly into a ponytail, had always carried himself with the effortless charisma of a movie star. He wasn't just a basketball legend at their college. He was the guy everyone wanted to know, and Barty had known him. They'd crossed paths often, living in the same apartment building during their college years. Larry's charm extended off the court, where he'd always been quick with a joke or a smile, easily drawing people into his orbit. As the highlight reel ended, Marty leaned back in his chair, the soft creak of the seat breaking the room's stillness. He clicked on the next video in the queue, expecting another compilation of Larry's basketball feats. Instead, the title caught his eye. Big L, Another Conquest. Confused, Marty's brow furrowed as he hesitated, then clicked play. The video opened with a wide shot of a vibrant Miami nightclub, its neon lights casting a kaleidoscope of colors over a thrumming dance floor. In the center of the frame, Larry stood out unmistakably. His ponytail, now shorter but still recognizable, he was dancing closely, too closely, with a stunning blonde. Marty's stomach dropped. As the camera zoomed in, Marty's pulse quickened. The woman wasn't just anyone, it was Lee, his wife. Her laughter, usually a melody that lifted his spirits, now sounded cruelly distant as she leaned into Larry's embrace. Their bodies moved in perfect sync, the dance charged with an overt sensuality that left no room for misinterpretation. Marty's chest tightened as he watched Lee tilt her head back, her blonde hair catching the flashing club lights. Larry pulled her closer, and then, as if to drive the knife deeper, the video ended with a lingering shot of them locked in a passionate, full-body kiss. His breath caught in his throat, his hands frozen over the keyboard. A sharp pain twisted in his stomach, a mix of shock, rage, and betrayal swirling in his mind. His heart raced, each beat a reminder of the image he could never unsee. He replayed the clip, hoping, irrationally, that he'd misunderstood. But each frame confirmed the unbearable truth. His wife, the woman he thought he knew better than anyone, was in Larry's arms, on display for the world. Marty's fingers trembled as he downloaded the video, the dull hum of his laptop's fan the only sound in the room. His jaw tightened. He reached for his phone, dialing Lee's number with a trembling hand, but it rang unanswered. As the video replayed in his mind, Marty's shock hardened into something sharper, an all-consuming rage. He could feel the betrayal seeping into every corner of his thoughts. And for the first time, he realized that this moment wasn't just devastating. It was the beginning of something far worse. He didn't know yet how much his life was about to change forever. Marty sat frozen in his chair, staring at the blank screen where the video had just played. His hands rested limply on the keyboard, his mind spinning. For a long moment he didn't move. The soft whir of the laptop fan and the distant hum of the refrigerator were the only sounds in the room. Then, as if a dam broke inside him, he slammed his fist against the desk, the sharp sound cutting through the stillness. His coffee mug tipped, spilling its lukewarm contents across a pile of papers, but Marty didn't notice. He was already standing, pacing the room in erratic circles. "How could she do this to me?" he muttered aloud, his voice raw. How could she ever do this? After everything we've built, after everything I've done for her. He stopped pacing, gripping the back of the chair tightly as he stared down at the glowing screen. His reflection in the darkened surface looked foreign, his face pale, his eyes red-rimmed. "No," he whispered to himself, shaking his head. "This can't be real. It can't be." But it was. The video was there, undeniable proof of Lee's betrayal, and now the world knew it too. Marty clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. He had to act, to do something, anything, to make sense of this. He clicked to download the clip, his fingers trembling as he saved it to his laptop. His heart pounded in his ears as he reached for his phone and dialed Lee's number. It rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. He stared at the screen in disbelief before calling again. Still no answer. "Pick up, Lee," he growled under his breath. "Pick up the damn phone." But she didn't. Frustrated, he threw the phone onto the couch and rubbed his hands over his face, his thoughts racing. He needed answers, and if Lee wouldn't give them to him, he knew someone who might. He scrolled through his contacts and tapped on Bart's name. Bart Kovat was one of his oldest friends, someone he trusted, and, as luck would have it, Bart was also at the Miami conference. The phone rang longer this time before Bart picked up, his voice hesitant. "Hello?" "Yeah." "Bart, it's Marty," he said, his voice taut. "I need to talk to you. Do you know where Lee is right now?" There was a long pause on the line. Marty could hear Bart exhale heavily before he spoke again, his voice laced with unease. "Marty, man, I think you need to know something." But it's not easy to hear. Marty's grip on the phone tightened. "Just tell me." But Bart hesitated again, then plunged ahead. "She's been spending time with Larry. A lot of time. They've been inseparable since Tuesday night. She's not even coming back to her room at night." Marty felt his stomach drop. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Are you saying she's been with him? Every night?" "Yeah," Bart admitted reluctantly. "That's what everyone's assuming. She hasn't joined a group for dinner or anything, and, well, I've seen them together. They're not exactly hiding it." Marty's legs gave out, and he sank onto the couch. His free hand clenched the fabric tightly as he fought to steady his breathing. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I didn't want to believe it," Bart said softly. "And honestly, I thought it might just be a fling, something she'd regret and never talk about. But now..." His voice trailed off, and Marty could hear the guilt in his tone. "Marty, I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix this," Marty snapped, the anger surging back. He stood abruptly, pacing again. "What the hell am I supposed to do now? My wife is screwing around with Larry Johnson, and the whole damn internet knows it." "I don't know, man," Bart admitted. "I really don't. But you need to talk to her. Get her side of things, I guess." Marty stopped pacing and stared out the window into the darkness. "Tell me one thing," he said after a long silence. "Has this been going on for a while, or is this just Miami?" Bart sighed heavily. "I don't know for sure, Marty, but I can tell you this. After Tuesday, it's like they've been glued together. I didn't want to believe it either, but it's hard to ignore." Marty closed his eyes, the weight of Bart's words settling over him like a heavy blanket. "Thanks, Bart," he said finally, his voice devoid of emotion. "If you see her tomorrow morning before her flight, tell her not to bother coming home. I'll handle it from there." There was another long pause before Bart replied, his voice subdued. "I understand. I'm really sorry, Marty. I wish I had better news." Marty ended the call and stood in the darkened room, the phone still clenched in his hand. His thoughts churned as he tried to process everything: the betrayal, the humiliation, the public exposure. It was too much to bear. In the silence, one thought rose above the rest. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Marty leaned back in his chair, his mind drifting to the day he first met Lee. It was the kind of memory that stayed sharp despite the years. It was the first day of their junior year math class, and the room was nearly empty when Marty walked in, his bag slung over his shoulder. Lee was sitting by herself near the window, sketching absent-mindedly in her notebook. Her blonde hair caught the sunlight streaming in, creating a halo effect that made her seem almost ethereal. Marty, never one to hesitate, took the seat next to her. "Smart choice," she said, glancing up with a smirk. "Most guys are too scared to sit near me." Yeah. Marty chuckled. "Well, I figured if you're this far from the door, you can't smell too bad." Her laughter was quick and genuine, and from that moment, something clicked. Voyer said, "Their conversation started in class, but soon spilled over into the campus cafe, study sessions, and late-night walks." Lee had a sharp wit that kept Marty on his toes, and he loved how her green eyes lit up when she was excited about something. One particularly memorable outing was a spontaneous trip to the local amusement park. Marty had insisted they ride the Ferris wheel, despite Lee's protests about heights. As the car reached the top and the view unfolded below them, Lee's initial fear melted away, and she leaned into Marty, her laughter carried by the breeze. "You planned this, didn't you?" she teased, her voice soft. "Maybe," he replied, slipping an arm around her. "I just wanted to see if I could make you laugh that hard." It was moments like these that solidified their bond. Marty wasn't just drawn to Lee's beauty, but to her drive and ambition. She had dreams of breaking into the world of public relations, and she worked tirelessly toward them. Marty, on the other hand, was focused on his chemistry degree, though he often joked that she was his favorite distraction. Lee was dating Rashad when they first met, a hockey player who exuded confidence but didn't seem to value her the way Marty did. Their relationship started to unravel when Rashad was caught sneaking around with Marty's neighbor, Stephanie, after a dinner party. Marty, who had known about Rashad's indiscretions for a while, debated whether to tell Lee. Ultimately, Rashad's actions exposed themselves, and Lee ended things decisively. "It's not the cheating that hurts the most," she confided to Marty one evening. "It's that I feel so replaceable." Finally, "You're not replaceable," Marty said firmly. "Not to me." Yeah. It wasn't long after that their friendship deepened into something more. Marty asked her to join him for a bridge tournament on an army base, a seemingly trivial event that became the backdrop for their first kiss. Under the dim fluorescent lights of the rec hall, they celebrated their victory with laughter and a lingering glance that neither could deny. When Marty leaned in, Lee met him halfway. After graduation, Marty proposed during a quiet evening at home. They were sitting on his small balcony, overlooking the city lights, when he pulled out a modest ring and held it out to her. "Lee, I don't have a big speech or anything rehearsed," he said, his voice steady but earnest. "I just know that I can't imagine my life without you in it. Will you marry me?" Lee blinked back tears and nodded, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Yes, Marty. Of course, yes." Their wedding was simple but filled with love. They moved into a house Marty had inherited from his grandfather, where they would begin their life together. When their twin daughters, Betsy and Linda, were born 2 years later, their family felt complete. Parenthood brought its challenges, but Marty and Lee faced them together. Late-night feedings became a shared responsibility. Marty would warm the bottles while Lee rocked the babies back to sleep. As the girls grew older, they divided duties. Lee managed the school schedules and extracurricular activities, while Marty handled the house repairs and cooked on weekends. But cracks began to form as life's pressures mounted. Lee's career in public relations demanded long hours and frequent travel, while Marty's transition to working from home as a contractor left him feeling isolated. They rarely had time for date nights, and when they did, Conversations often revolved around logistics rather than dreams or feelings. Marty noticed subtle changes in Lee. She was more distracted, her phone constantly buzzing with work emails or messages she brushed off as just colleagues. When he asked her about taking a vacation together, she hesitated. "Work's just so busy right now," she'd say. "Maybe next year." He tried to shake off his unease, chalking it up to the natural ebb and flow of a long marriage. But there were moments, like when she came home late from an office party, her hair slightly disheveled, or when she seemed distant even during their rare quiet evenings, that left him wondering if something had shifted between them. Despite these doubts, Marty never imagined betrayal. He believed they were simply navigating the ups and downs of life, just as they always had. But as he sat in the quiet of their home, replaying the Miami video in his mind, he realized how much he had overlooked. The signs had been there, but he had clung to the hope that their bond was unshakable. Now, with that illusion shattered, he felt the weight of all they had built and all they stood to lose. Marty sat at the kitchen table, his laptop open in front of him and Lee's Gmail account displayed on the screen. He had spent the past hour piecing together a timeline from her emails, phone records, and the video that had blown his life apart. His heart pounded as he scrolled through her inbox, looking for anything that might confirm or refute what he already suspected. Most of the messages were work, but then a name caught his eye. Larry J. The subject line was innocuous. "Great seeing you." His fingers trembled as he clicked it open. The email was brief, but damning. "Lee, thanks for a wonderful evening. You looked stunning. Let me know when we can talk again. Larry." Marty clenched his jaw, a wave of nausea rising in his throat. His gaze darted to the timestamp. It had been sent the morning after their first night together in Miami. He slammed the laptop shut, unable to read more. "Where have we been?" Grabbing his phone, he checked Lee's call logs on their shared account. 2 late-night calls to Larry's number the week before the conference stared back at him, and a cold realization settled over him. This hadn't started in Miami. It had started earlier, much earlier. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway snapped him out of his thoughts. Marty stood, his movement sharp and purposeful, as he walked to the front door and looked through the window. Lee stepped out of a cab, her suitcase in hand, and glanced toward the house with an expression that was a mix of exhaustion and hesitation. Marty didn't move to open the door. Instead, he waited, his heart pounding in his chest. She tried the keypad but found it unresponsive. Confusion spread across her face, and she tried again, pressing the numbers harder this time. When it didn't work, she looked up at the door, realization dawning. She knocked softly at first, then more urgently. "Marty?" she called, her voice muffled through the door. "Marty, please, let me in. We need to talk." He didn't answer. Instead, he stood behind the door, his arms crossed, staring at the ground, as anger bubbled up inside him. The image of her dancing with Larry, kissing him, flashed through his mind again. "Marty, I know you're there," her voice cracked, and she knocked harder. "Please, just let me explain." Something large and heavy slammed into her side. Finally, he opened the door, his expression cold. "You don't live here anymore," he said flatly. "Your things are in the garage." Lee's face crumpled. "Marty, please," she whispered, stepping closer, but he held up a hand to stop her. "Don't. Just don't," he said, his voice low but trembling with restrained fury. "You humiliated me, Lee. You made a fool of me in front of everyone. Our kids, our friends, the entire damn internet. Do you even understand what you've done?" Tears streamed down her face. "It was a mistake," she pleaded. "I wasn't thinking. I was caught up in the moment. I love you, Marty. I love our family. Please, just give me a chance to make this right." He let out a bitter laugh. "A mistake?" he echoed. "You call 3 nights with Larry Johnson a mistake? Do you think I can just forget what I saw? That our daughters can forget?" As if on cue, the twins appeared at the top of the stairs. Betsy, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, glared down at her mother. "I hate you," she shouted, her voice shaking. "How could you do this to Dad? To us?" Linda stood behind her, silent but tearful. She clung to the railing, her eyes wide and filled with confusion. "Mom, why?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Lee turned toward them, her face stricken. "Girls, Don't," Betsy interrupted, her voice rising. "You don't get to talk to us like nothing happened. You ruined everything." Linda's quiet sobs filled the silence that followed. Lee took a step toward them, but Marty stepped into her path, his glare cutting through her like a blade. "Don't you dare drag them into this," he said, his voice trembling with anger. "You've done enough." Later that night, after Lee had retreated to her parents' house at Marty's insistence, he sat with the twins in the living room. Betsy was still seething, her face red and her fists clenched. "Why didn't you just make her leave forever?" she demanded. Marty sighed, running a hand through his hair. "She's still your mother, Betsy," he said, though the words felt hollow. "No matter how much I wish things were different, she'll always be your mom." Linda sniffled, her voice quivering. "Is she ever coming back?" Marty hesitated, his throat tightening. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "But what I do know is that I'm here for you. Both of you. Always." Betsy didn't respond, but her expression softened just slightly. Linda leaned against him, seeking comfort, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. In the days that followed, Marty focused on creating some semblance of stability for the girls. He dropped them off at school, helped with their homework, and tried to keep his own emotions in check. But the house felt emptier without Lee, and every time he passed the garage, he was reminded of the chaos she'd left in her wake. One afternoon, he caught Betsy staring at her phone, her brows furrowed. "What are you looking at?" he asked gently. She held it out to him, and his stomach dropped. It was the video, the one that had shattered their lives. "People at school keep sending it to me," she said, her voice heavy with frustration. "They think it's funny." Marty took the phone and set it aside. "You don't need to watch that," he said firmly. "Let me handle it." "How?" Betsy asked, her voice filled with doubt. "You can't fix this." He sighed, knowing she was right. There was no fixing what had happened. But as he looked at his daughters, he resolved to do everything he could to protect them from the fallout, even if it meant confronting the pain head-on. "You tell the nurses whatever it is they need to know." The storm was far from over, but Marty knew one thing for certain. He would weather it, for their sake. Lee sat alone in her childhood bedroom, the soft glow of a bedside lamp casting long shadows on the pale blue walls. She hugged her knees to her chest, her head resting against them as tears silently traced paths down her cheeks. The room smelled faintly of lavender, the same scent her mother used to calm her as a child. But now, nothing could soothe the storm raging inside her. "I can't stop thinking about Larry," she admitted to herself, the thought piercing her like a dagger. She hated that it was true. His smile, his confidence, the way he made her feel desired, it was intoxicating. And yet, every time the memory of him surfaced, it was quickly chased by a crushing wave of guilt. "But I know this is wrong. It was always wrong." She closed her eyes, trying to make sense of how she'd let things spiral so far out of control. The truth was, she hadn't felt this way, wanted, alive, free, in years. Her life with Marty had become a blur of responsibilities, work, deadlines, the girls' school schedules, and the endless cycle of chores and errands. She'd loved her family deeply, but somewhere along the way she'd started to feel invisible. Marty, working from home, had grown more introverted, retreating into his own world. Their conversations were often about logistics, who would pick up the girls, what bills needed paying, but rarely about their dreams or feelings anymore. "I wish I could go back," she thought, her chest tightening. "I wish I could stop myself from making that first mistake." The Miami trip had felt like a reprieve at first, a chance to breathe, to focus on herself for a few days. But then Larry had appeared, larger than life, just as he'd been in college. Seeing him again had stirred something in her that she hadn't even realized was dormant. He'd hugged her with the same easy charm, his voice warm and familiar. Her words meant nothing to him. "Still as stunning as ever," he'd said, his smile disarming. It really was as if the man were living inside his head. Those words had lingered, filling a void she hadn't wanted to acknowledge existed, and when he pursued her, she hadn't resisted. She could have, she should have. But she didn't. Why didn't I just say no? The question gnawed at her. She knew the answer, though she hated to admit it. She'd wanted to feel that rush, that spark of being desired again. In Larry's arms, she'd felt like someone else, someone carefree and bold, not the tired, overwhelmed version of herself she'd become. But that fleeting escape had come at an unbearable cost. The look on Marty's face when he opened the door earlier that day would haunt her forever. The pain, the anger, the betrayal. And her daughters, Betsy's fury and Linda's quiet heartbreak, were almost too much to bear. She'd shattered their world for a few nights of selfish indulgence. Lee pressed her palms to her face, her sobs muffled by her hands. "I wish I could undo it all," she thought, desperation clawing at her. "I wish I could take their pain away." Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, but she didn't look at it. She couldn't face anyone, not Marty, not her daughters, not even her parents, who had been kind enough to take her in but clearly disapproved of what she'd done. The weight of their silent judgment only added to the crushing guilt she carried. How do I even begin to fix this? She wondered, though she already knew the answer. She couldn't. Some things couldn't be fixed, and she feared her marriage was one of them. The realization left her hollow, a deep ache settling in her chest. She wiped her tears, trying to steady her breathing. The house was quiet, her parents having gone to bed hours ago. The stillness was oppressive, amplifying the thoughts she couldn't escape. "I need to be better for them," she resolved, though the path forward seemed impossibly steep. For the first time in days, she allowed herself a sliver of hope. Hope that maybe, one day, she could make amends. But as she lay down and stared at the ceiling, sleep eluding her, she knew that hope wouldn't erase the damage she'd done. It was a fragile thing, and she clung to it because it was all she had left. The evening air was cool and crisp as Marty walked along the dimly lit path near the park. The sound of leaves rustling in the breeze was interrupted only by the occasional distant honk of a car. He had been restless all day, pacing the house and unable to focus on anything. Now, his feet seemed to lead him here on their own, his thoughts swirling with anger and confusion. He hadn't meant to walk past Larry's house, but there it was, large, modern, and imposing, with the kind of confidence its owner exuded. Marty's jaw tightened as he glanced at the basketball hoop in the driveway. It was just another reminder of the man who had upended his life. He turned away sharply, shoving his hands into his pockets and headed toward the park, his steps quick and purposeful. The sound of a bouncing basketball broke the silence ahead, pulling Marty from his thoughts. His heart skipped a beat as he looked up and saw him, Larry. There he was, dribbling the ball with the same easy grace that had made him a star. Marty froze, his breath catching in his throat. A rush of emotion surged through him, rage, disgust, and a dark satisfaction at finally seeing the man face to face. Larry hadn't noticed him yet. He was focused on his game, taking a few steps back before launching a shot at the hoop set up on the court. The ball clanged off the rim and rolled away, bouncing lazily toward the street. Marty's fists clenched as he watched Larry jog after it, his long strides confident, almost careless. Every fiber of Marty's being screamed at him to say something, to confront the man who had destroyed his marriage. His feet felt rooted to the spot, torn between charging forward and staying hidden in the shadows. But then something shifted. A car engine roared in the distance, its headlights cutting through the darkness. The ball had rolled further than Larry expected, stopping in the middle of the street. Without hesitation, Larry stepped onto the road, his focus solely on retrieving it. Marty's heart pounded as he saw the SUV barreling toward Larry. The headlights grew brighter, the sound of the engine louder, but Larry seemed oblivious. "Larry!" Marty's voice broke through the tension, but it was too late. The driver honked, a sharp, desperate sound that pierced the night, but there was no time. The SUV hit Larry with a sickening thud, sending him flying onto the hood before he rolled off and landed on the asphalt with a dull, lifeless thump. The basketball, now forgotten, wobbled to a stop a few feet away. Marty stood frozen, his pulse roaring in his ears. His breath came in short, shallow gasps as he watched the scene unfold. The SUV screeched to a halt, and the driver, an older man, stumbled out, shouting into the night. "I didn't see him! I didn't see him!" Larry lay motionless on the ground, his limbs awkwardly sprawled. Marty took a hesitant step forward, his stomach twisting in knots. A part of him wanted to feel relief. This man, the source of his misery, was gone. But another part of him recoiled at the sight, the finality of it hitting harder than he expected. He deserved to pay, Marty thought, his fists trembling at his sides. But not like this, not this way. His gaze caught the squat pedestrian. He walked closer, his shoes crunching against the gravel as he approached the scene. Larry's eyes were half open, his chest barely rising. For a moment, their gazes met, and in that instant, Marty saw something that stopped him cold. Fear. Larry's mouth moved as if trying to say something, but no words came out. Marty knelt down, his hands hovering uncertainly. "What could you possibly say to me now?" Marty whispered, his voice shaking with anger and confusion. But Larry didn't answer. His chest rose one last time, then fell still. The driver of the SUV was on the phone, his voice panicked as he spoke to emergency services. "There's been an accident. A man was hit. I think he's gone." Marty stayed there, staring at Larry's lifeless body, his emotions a tangled mess. Relief coursed through him, but it was immediately followed by guilt. He felt his anger boil up again, not just at Larry, but at the entire situation. This isn't justice, he thought bitterly. It's chaos, and it changes nothing. He stood slowly, his legs unsteady beneath him. The distant wail of sirens filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. Marty stepped back, his hands shaking as he rubbed them over his face. He felt hollow, as if all the anger, the pain, the betrayal had been sucked out of him and replaced with a heavy, aching emptiness. When the paramedics arrived, they moved with brisk efficiency, but there was nothing they could do. One of them turned to Marty and the driver, shaking his head. "He's gone." The words echoed in Marty's mind as he turned and walked away, leaving the chaos behind him. He didn't look back. He couldn't. As he made his way home, the conflicting emotions inside him threatened to overwhelm him. A fleeting satisfaction that Larry was no longer a problem, a deep anger that it had ended like this, and a profound sadness that nothing would ever undo the damage that had already been done. The weight of it all pressed down on him, and for the first time, Marty realized that there were no winners in this story, only loss. The courtroom was cold and clinical, the sterile environment amplifying Marty's sense of detachment. He sat at the plaintiff's table, his lawyer flipping through a folder of documents with practiced efficiency. Across the room, Lee sat quietly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked smaller than he remembered, her once confident demeanor replaced by a fragile stillness. Their eyes met briefly, but Marty quickly looked away, the weight of her presence suffocating. The judge's voice droned on, outlining the final terms of the divorce. Marty barely listened, his mind elsewhere. He thought about the twins, Betsy and Linda, who were at school, blissfully unaware of the proceedings that would permanently redefine their family. The thought of them brought a pang to his chest, but also a sense of clarity. Everything he was doing now, every painful step, was for them. That morning, Marty had woken early to prepare breakfast for the girls. The house was quiet, the only sounds the soft sizzle of bacon and the hum of the coffee machine. Betsy came downstairs first, her hair still a mess from sleep. She slid into a chair at the kitchen table, glancing at him with a mix of gratitude and lingering anger. "Pancakes today?" she asked, her tone carefully neutral. "Of course," Marty said with a small smile, flipping one onto her plate. "Extra syrup?" She nodded, and for a moment it felt almost normal. Then Linda appeared, rubbing her eyes and carrying her favorite stuffed animal. She climbed onto the chair next to Betsy, leaning against her sister for comfort. Marty placed a plate in front of her, gently brushing her hair back from her face. "How'd you sleep, sweetheart?" he asked. Linda shrugged, her voice barely audible. "Okay." Marty sat down across from them, watching as they ate in silence. He wanted to say something, anything, to ease their pain, but the words eluded him. Instead, he reached across the table, placing a hand on each of theirs. "We're going to be okay," he said softly, willing himself to believe it. "I promise." Now in the courtroom, the judge asked if either party had any objections to the terms. Marty shook his head, his gaze fixed on a spot on the table. Lee hesitated, her lips trembling as she whispered, "No." Her voice was almost inaudible, but it carried the weight of finality. Marty felt a flicker of something, pity perhaps, but he quickly pushed it aside. He couldn't afford to dwell on what was already lost. When the session ended, the judge pronounced the marriage dissolved. Marty stood, his movements heavy as he gathered his things. He glanced at Lee one last time. She looked at him, her eyes glistening, but he turned away, walking out of the courtroom and into the crisp afternoon air. The house felt emptier than ever when he returned that evening. Lee's absence was tangible, a hollow space that seemed to echo with memories of better times. But as he stepped into the living room, he saw the twins sprawled on the couch, laughing at a silly cartoon. The sound was a balm to his wounded heart. "Hey girls," he said, setting his keys on the counter. "What's so funny?" Linda looked up, her face lighting up as she waved him over. "Come watch, Dad. It's the one where the dog tries to drive the car." Marty chuckled and sat between them, pulling Linda onto his lap while Betsy leaned against his shoulder. For a moment, the weight of the day lifted, replaced by the simple joy of being with his daughters. As the days turned into weeks, Marty focused on rebuilding a life for himself and the girls. He set routines, helping with homework, cooking dinner, and taking them to their favorite park on weekends. The house, though quieter, began to feel like a home again. There were moments of sadness, of course, passing the empty spot in the closet where Lee's clothes had hung, or hearing Linda ask if her mom would be joining them for dinner. But there were also moments of hope. Betsy smiling as they played a board game, Linda laughing as she helped him bake cookies. Marty knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The scars of betrayal and loss ran deep, but as he tucked the twins into bed one night, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't in a long time. Peace. He kissed each of them on the forehead, whispering goodnight before turning off the lights. As he lay in bed, the house quiet around him, Marty allowed himself a small, hopeful thought. Maybe, just maybe, they would all find a way to heal. The morning sun filtered through the curtains as Marty sipped his coffee at the kitchen table, watching Betsy and Linda get ready for school. Betsy, ever the determined one, was already dressed and brushing her hair with brisk, almost aggressive strokes. Linda, on the other hand, sat sleepily at the counter, nibbling on a piece of toast. "Don't forget your science project, Linda," Marty reminded gently. "It's still on the dining table." Linda's eyes widened and she jumped up, nearly spilling her juice in the process. Marty chuckled softly, a small moment of levity in a life that had been anything but easy recently. These mornings had become his anchor, a time when he felt most connected to his daughters and most certain of his purpose. Over the months since the divorce, Marty had thrown himself into a new routine. His mornings revolved around the girls, ensuring they had everything they needed for the day. Afternoons and evenings were spent balancing his contract work with personal projects, a long overdue renovation of the basement, and developing a new software idea that had been lingering in his mind for years. It was about staying busy. It was about finding himself again in the wake of everything he'd lost. Though Marty avoided serious relationships, he occasionally went on casual dates. Friends had encouraged him to get out, to try meeting new people, but every interaction felt superficial. He couldn't shake the shadow of Lee's betrayal, or the fear of letting someone in again. One evening, after a particularly quiet dinner with the girls, Betsy looked up from her plate, her expression serious. "Dad," she said, "are you ever going to get married again?" The question caught him off guard. "I don't know, Bets," he admitted. "Right now, I'm just focused on you and Linda. That's what matters most." Betsy nodded, but her gaze lingered on him for a moment longer, as if trying to decipher something unspoken. Linda, ever the peacemaker, chimed in. "We like it when you're here, Dad. We don't need anyone else." Marty smiled, his chest tightening with emotion. "I like being here too," he said softly. Meanwhile, Lee's life was a stark contrast. Living in a modest apartment a few miles away, she struggled to rebuild her world. The societal judgment was palpable. Colleagues whispered, friends distanced themselves, and even casual acquaintances seemed to look at her differently. But it was the estrangement from her daughters that hurt the most. Betsy barely spoke to her during their visitation weekends, her anger simmering just beneath the surface. Linda was kinder, but even her forgiveness came with a quiet sadness that made Lee ache. Determined to make amends, Lee began attending therapy, not only to understand her actions, but also to learn how to reconnect with her children. One Saturday, during her weekend with the girls, Lee surprised them with a trip to the local animal shelter. "I thought we could volunteer here together," she said, her voice tentative. "Help walk the dogs, maybe play with the cats." Linda's face lit up, but Betsy crossed her arms. "Why are you doing this now?" she asked coldly. "Is this supposed to make everything better?" "No," Lee said, her tone steady. I want to spend time with you both, and I thought this might be something we'd enjoy together." Betsy hesitated, her expression softening slightly as Linda tugged her sleeve. "Come on, Betsy, it might be fun." That afternoon, as they walked a pair of excitable puppies around the shelter grounds, Lee felt the smallest glimmer of hope. She knew it would take time, years perhaps, but she was determined to show her daughters that she could be better. Back at home, Marty found moments of healing in unexpected places. One evening, while cleaning out the garage, he stumbled across an old photo album from their early years of marriage. He hesitated, his fingers brushing over a picture of him and Lee on their wedding day. The image stirred a bittersweet mix of emotions, fondness for the life they had built, and a deep sadness for how it had unraveled. He closed the album gently, setting it aside. There was no point in dwelling on the past, he reminded himself. His focus was on the future, on his daughters, and on building a life that felt whole again. Though the scars of betrayal lingered, Marty began to feel a quiet strength growing within him. He started running again, something he hadn't done since before the divorce. On those early morning jogs, as the world slowly came to life around him, he found a sense of peace and clarity that had eluded him for so long. The twins, too, were adjusting. Betsy's anger softened over time, especially as she saw her father's unwavering dedication to their family. Linda, with her gentle heart, became the glue that held them all together, always finding ways to bring laughter and light into their home. One evening, as the three of them sat on the couch watching a movie, Betsy leaned her head against Marty's shoulder. "You're a good dad. You know that?" she said quietly. Marty smiled, his heart swelling. "Thanks, kiddo. That means a lot." As the credits rolled and Linda fell asleep on his lap, Marty felt a sense of contentment he hadn't thought possible. Life wasn't perfect, and the wounds of the past hadn't fully healed, but they were moving forward, together. And for the first time in a long time, he believed they would be okay. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow across the park as Marty sat on a bench, watching Betsy and Linda chase each other through the grass. Their laughter rang out, a melody that eased the tension he hadn't even realized he was holding. For the first time in months, he felt the edges of peace creeping into his heart. Life was still marked by scars, but moments like this reminded him that it was still worth living. A few weeks earlier, Marty had an unexpected conversation with his father-in-law, Milt. They'd been sharing coffee in Marty's kitchen, the atmosphere unusually heavy. Milt hesitated before speaking, his voice quieter than usual. "Marty, there's something I think you should know." Marty raised an eyebrow but said nothing, sensing the weight of what was about to come. "I was worried about you," Milt began, his eyes fixed on his mug. "After what happened with Lee and Larry, I thought you might do something rash." The implication hung in the air like a storm cloud. Marty felt his chest tighten, but he didn't interrupt. "I didn't plan for things to go the way they did," Milt continued, his voice trembling slightly. "But I wanted to protect you, protect my granddaughters. So I made sure Larry would be somewhere you could see him, somewhere it would resolve itself." Marty's breath caught, the memory of that night flooding back, the ball rolling into the street, the SUV appearing out of nowhere. He stared at Milt, his mind racing. "Are you saying?" Milt met his gaze, his expression somber. "I didn't plan for him to die, Marty, but I made sure he crossed your path. I hoped it would scare you into stepping back, not—" He trailed off, shaking his head. Now, sitting in the park, Marty couldn't shake the unease that lingered after that revelation. On one hand, he felt a grim sort of gratitude. Milt had, in his own way, prevented him from making a mistake that could have cost him his freedom and his daughters. But the thought of orchestrating another man's death, however indirectly, left a bitter taste. He shifted his focus back to Betsy and Linda. They were twirling in the sunlight, their laughter blending with the rustle of leaves. In that moment, he realized that the past, no matter how painful, didn't have to define the future. Life was messy and imperfect, but as he watched his daughters, he knew it was still beautiful. He smiled softly, the warmth of hope settling in his chest. Moving forward wouldn't erase the scars, but it would give them purpose, and that was enough.